Hello Year 5, it's Mrs Mackenzie Ardo here. Happy Wednesday. This is our second literacy YouTube lesson. I hope that you learned a lot from the first session and I hope you've completed the task, because today's lesson we will focus on looking at some of the answers from the text that you focused on Monday, and we will then go on to looking at an example of how to write an instructional text. Okay, so your instructional text that you had to look at was all about a muskin, cute little fluffy muskin. And in your instructions, you should have found a title, okay? You should have found an instruction. And within that introduction, you should have seen a question to hook the reader, to interest them in whatever it is they're about to complete. Now, within these instructions, you also should have found a list of equipment. Now, remember I said you don't always need a list of equipment, but in this case we did. And you will see that it has its own subheading, and the things that are needed in that section are bullet pointed. Now, they don't always need to be bullet pointed. It could be bullet points, it could be numbers, it could be arrows, whichever symbol you decide really. So when you go on to writing your own instructions, if it is that you need a list of things in order to complete the instructions, then you can decide on what that format is going to look like. So you could use a bullet point if you wanted to, or you could use a number if you wanted to, okay? Now, you also should have found that the instructions are in chronological order, in the order of how the reader is expected to complete it to get the best outcome, okay? Now, there are also imperative verbs such as pick up, support, give, open, introduce and allow, and they're just some of them. You probably have a longer list than I do. And then we go on to conjunctions, adverbs and prepositions. So an example of one of the conjunctions would be once home, okay, or over the next few days. An example of an adverb is gently, but an adverb for place and for cause, you could have place him carefully, okay? So you've got to really look at the difference. One tells you exactly what to do, the other gives more information as to how you should do that, okay? So adverbs tell us how, but when it comes to place and cause, exactly how, so with a little bit more information. And then we have preposition, outside the house, so saying where. Now, I'm sure within your list you had far more than I have. However, if you do have the things that I've listed, then well done. Now, as you look through your instructions, you will also notice that there is another section which is bringing your muskin home. So when you're writing your own instructions, if you've decided that actually my instructions have got two parts, you can clearly label those with a subheading, okay? And then clearly label those steps in order, in numerical order, so that the reader can follow them clearly and in chronological order. Now, within these instructions, you should notice that there is something missing. What is it? What is that optional thing that you could include that may help the reader to understand your instructions further? What is missing? Okay, now we've gone through the answers. Let's now have a look at an example. Okay, so like we decided before, we know that we need a title. Now, the title of mine is going to be How to Fix a Puncture on a Monster Truck. Now, if anyone knows me, they will know that I absolutely love driving, especially driving fast cars. So can you imagine driving a monster truck? I think it would be brilliant. Now, so I've written an introduction, so it says this. Have you ever had a puncture on a bicycle or seen a flat tyre on a car? Imagine if the puncture was on a huge tyre of a monster truck. How would you fix the puncture and get the truck back on track, performing stunts and crushing cars? follow these instructions and you will find out how to fix it. So my question, how are you going to do this? How are you going to get back to crushing those cards? It's a question that grabs the reader and wants the reader then wants to continue, wants to read on to complete the instructions. Now I've also got a checklist of what you need. A very large container of warm water. A paddling pool would be ideal because obviously the tyres are enormous. A strong rubber patch, a piece of sandpaper, some chalk, coloured wax crayon, and finally rubber solution, which is similar to glue. Okay, so the third thing, we need to decide on a method. Now I've only written a few steps here. I want you to listen out for the imperative verbs, okay? Now remember, your method needs to be in chronological order, in the order you expect the reader to complete the instructions in, okay? So, number one, firstly, remove the tyre from this truck with the help of several strong people who are able to help lift the truck off the ground. Number two, perform a thorough check to see if any sharp objects remain stuck in the tyre and carefully remove them if necessary. This is particularly important if the truck has been driven over other vehicles. Now it's really important, remember, to include your adverbs, include your conjunctions, include your prepositions, okay, because it just helps the reader to understand exactly what it is they need to do, and it's just easier to follow the instructions. Okay, so point 4, conclusion. So remember, this sums up what the instructions expected you to do. So what is the outcome? And it's really important as well for a really clear conclusion, because then the reader can see that whatever they have produced, they can then match up with the conclusion, match up with the instructions that they've followed, and they can then make a decision as to whether they've actually got the outcome that was expected. Okay, so this is the conclusion. It's very short. So your tyre is now ready to be returned into place, and your truck should be ready to go crushing again! Exclamation mark. So your conclusion doesn't always need to be a full paragraph. It can just be a really sharp, short sentence that allows the reader to understand whatever it is their task was to complete. Now, my extra tip for advice, now listen very carefully to this year 5. If you ever actually own or drive a monster truck, now remember, you are not of age obviously to drive, okay? So if you ever actually own a monster truck, always remember to ask an expert before deciding to change the tyre. Okay, so your task for today is I want you to think carefully about what you want your instructions to be about. Okay, so you're not necessarily writing the instructions today, it's almost like a plan. So what is it that you want someone in your family to be able to complete? Okay, because then for tomorrow's task, you will actually be writing those instructions, thinking about the features, so using the checklist to help you, using the examples to help you. Now remember, your instructions can be recipes, it can be directions, it can be how to play a game, it could be how to create something, it could be how to build something, how to prepare something, how to care for something. So for example, with the Muskin, how to care for a pet, whatever it is, just make sure that it is in chronological order, make sure that the steps are clear, make sure it has a title, an introduction, full method, and a conclusion. And obviously, if you want to include a top tip or you want to include some pictures or diagrams, then do so. Now, please remember that if you are unsure about how to write your instructions, you can always use the template that we sent on Sunday. Okay, so please don't worry about the layout or worry about what it is that you're expected to do, because everything is there for you in the email that you were given on Sunday. Okay, please don't forget to scan in or take a picture of any work that you do and send it in to myself and Mr. Seekins. Have a wonderful rest of your day and have a wonderful rest of the week, and I will see you on Monday.